Park. And I just wanted to be on the call today and talk to you all about the fact that we have a seat open on the University Area Commission for District 3, which is Wineland Park. So I'm just kind of wanted to be on today just as first to see if anyone knows of anyone or would be willing to maybe think about being on the University Area Commission. And for those of you who don't know about the commission, we are we're elected. So my husband and I, a couple years ago, probably knocked on some of your doors to get signatures. And I guess I kind of like to say that we bring the problems and needs of our area to the commission, and we kind of bridge and promote the communication gap that you sometimes see between neighborhoods in the city. So we talk about development, preservation, enhancements to parks, streets, sidewalks. We have committees, we have a governing committee. I'm the chair of the planning committee. So it's really just, bringing, what you see and what you hear are issues going on in the neighborhood, bring it to the commission, and we, try to figure something out. It is the time commitment. So we meet on the third Wednesday of every month at 6:30. Then each person has to be on a committee. And so, like I said, I'm on the chair of the planning committee. We do have an immediate seat opening right now. So you would not have to run until the next election which is the beginning of the fall. So you would come and talk to the University Area Commission and say, hey, this is why I would want to fill the seat. And then we would take a vote, whether as to vote you in or not, until the next seat comes up. So just wanted to, so some of the things we talk about that we're currently talking about, and I know this has been a topic in the Civic Association, is the Summit intersection near Wineland Park. So we are talking about that. We are also trying to work with the city about street calming on Summit and 4th as well. And then also a topic that's going to be on planning this next week is about Airbnbs in the area. I know there's been a lot of concerns about Airbnbs popping up and issues happening at some of the Airbnbs. So that's kind of just like the quick of it. I put my information in the chat box. If anyone knows of anyone, or if you personally would like more information, I'd be happy to chat with you over the phone. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about that?
What is the street calming? Are you saying there's a lot of noise and a lot of
it's
drama?
So for example, there have been a lot of accidents. Well, there's a ton of accidents on 4th and Summit, but so street calming as in for example, one of the things we're trying to get or talk about for near the school is that crosswalk that's at the park. How can we make it, so one of a street calming would have the gates come down, or like lights flashing when someone goes to push to cross. So just looking at problem parts of the street, and does a flashing beacon need to go there, or does a crosswalk need to go there? So the goal is trying to make the area, walkable and safe for pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars. So those are just kind of some things we talk about.
Okay. Are you guys aware that we've got a mobility committee that's been talking about that in depth all year?
Yeah, I'm on the mobility committee.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So have the two committees interacted concerning those plans?
Yeah, so I'm on the mobility committee as well, and we, the University Area Commission, we have, we talked to council members about it. So where it's at right now is they were going to do a study. We had to do a study, they said, and the study was going to be done in the spring, but because of COVID, the study was halted. So I have a email in with the city trying to figure out what the next steps are, but I don't think the study is going to happen now until the fall when kids are back in school. So they can they're going to videotape and be out there observing and kind of seeing, what the traffic patterns, the pedestrian usage looks like, so they can get some more information. But that was the next step from the city's perspective.
Okay.
And then I was talking to Tanya about this before everyone got on. So there was, and I know this is something we talked about at the last Civic Association meeting, was about Joyce Hughes Park. So I live on Grant Avenue. My house is actually going to be directly across from the park that they're going to build, and the timeline is for the spring. But Thrive Development just had a happy hour virtual meeting with so everyone on in the single family homes, and then the condos, the new condos that are being built. And they were just giving a timeline of, development and all of that, but they started talking about the park. And I know I talked about this on at the last Civic Association meeting, that I would be happy to try and bridge the gap that we are seeing between Grant Park and the rest of Wineland Park. And honestly, the comments were very disturbing from the neighbors, not understanding why, because homeowners association is going to be paying for a lot of the upkeep, and so they don't understand why everyone else from the neighborhood's going to be able to use it when they're the ones that are going to be paying for it. So I think this is an urgent need, that we start having this conversation right away. And I'm going to reach out to Steve Bollinger at Thrive to maybe have him talk about this and how to best get maybe the homeowners association on with Wineland Park Civic Association, because I think I know that they're going, first of all, people are mad that it's not a dog park, and the comment was made that there's way more dogs on the street than kids, so why isn't a dog park? And then I said, well, you have to remember that this isn't just for the street, it's for the whole community. And people were very upset about that. So I think this is an extremely urgent need. So I know that I'm going to contact Thrive about this and try to get this conversation started.
I'd be glad to be involved in that conversation, Amy.
Great.
Since
Okay.
through the housing committee, like we've been talking about this for a while too.
Okay. Thanks, Laura.
Can you remind me if Thrive is connected to the Wagonbrenners at all, or if it's?
It's Wagonbrenner. They just changed their name to Thrive.
Yeah.
Usually the Wagonbrenners are more sympathetic to trying to do things that make sense, but.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to speak for anyone that works for Thrive, but I think the comments were very off-putting to them.
I'm sorry.
So I think Thrive was very surprised by the comments. So I think that, Steve at Thrive, he is able to, I think would be the best connect right now between both groups. So I think I'm going to go through him first to see what he recommends.
Can we compromise and have a dog park that everybody can use?
I think, so it's an open space. And I think the fact that they're leaving it to be basically open.
Please tell me Joyce was not allergic to dogs, by the way.
I think it was for everyone to use. So I don't think it's specific. It's going to be an open space. It's going to be for kids to run around. It's going to be for dogs to run around. The more disturbing part is that they just want it to be for their street and the rest of the neighborhood.
I mean, it's disturbing, but it's not surprising. You know,
It's not,
definitely something we saw coming. And so like, I think, you know, we can be upset about it, but it's also just a conversation that was waiting to be had. So
yeah.
I think it's a little unfortunate that it started sort of outside of the rest of the neighborhood, but that's all right. It starts somewhere and then we
Yeah.
continue it.
I'm curious how they would enforce that. I mean, they're going to have someone with checking IDs at the gate? It's not even logical.
There's not going to be a gate. Nothing's going to be gated, but I mean, the comments were just outrageous. Like, should there be a gate? Should there be only be access given to? So it was just like a lot of crazy. And right, like Laura said, it's not surprising, but to the degree of what was said is very surprising to me, I guess.
It actually doesn't surprise me at all. And I think it's completely to be expected. I mean, it's just to be expected. So, you know, we just, this is where it starts and we have to continue to have the conversation, but it's just not, yeah. This is the position that the way the city handles this puts us in as neighbors.
Yep.
Because the original commitment was for that to be a city park. And since the city will no longer shoulder that burden, it puts us in the middle. So I think that's unfair, but real. And why wouldn't they think it should be their park if they're paying for it, you know? So we have to navigate through the conversation.
Amy, are you?
Right, but you said before you got on, Laura, that they had most likely been informed of it upon purchasing their property. You know, this was a dedicated space a long time ago, so we feel confident that they were told before all this.
There's been real confusion when we even first started asking about how exactly it was going to be paid for several years ago.
Yeah.
The responses were not clear, you know.
Yeah.
And at first they said, well, it's from the tax increment financing money that the whole neighborhood has paid. And then they were like, oh, well, actually it's the HOA. And so there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been clear. And I think that my personal feeling is that no one wanted to actually acknowledge that this was going to be difficult, except those of us who were going to have to try and go to that park and not be welcomed. So, I mean, we knew from the beginning this was going to be an issue, and we're going to have to get together as a neighborhood. Maybe this will be a lever that will help Grant Park start to feel like they are part of the neighborhood. You know,
exactly, because it is all Weiland Park.
Right.
It is all Weiland Park, and it's unfortunate that that was left hanging in the air, the exact determination of who was going to be paying for it, because I wasn't aware that it was just going to be the HOA either. And I thought that had all been cleared up before they even got started. But again, I'm feeling like people living there on Grand Avenue had to be told that that park was going to be there. And I don't know why they didn't know that they would help pay for it being on their property, but that we are still all Weiland Park.
Amy, was there a budget that was shared about how much it would cost? And to the rest of the association, is there an opportunity to maybe raise some money? Maybe we do a couple fundraisers so that the association's contributing in some way to the park budget?
So there wasn't a budget share. So my understanding for the process is that in August, Thrive is going to go to, I think it's called the New Communities Association. And that is made up of Grant Park and Jeffrey Park, which is down in Italian Village. And then they're going to have they'll see a budget of how much it's going to cost. There's going to be irrigation as a part of it. So it's going to be pricey. $20 from the single family homes on Grant Park a month will go into, and then from the condos will go into the upkeep. But I think that's a great idea to try and figure out how to have some ownership from the Civic Association. I think that's a good idea.
I think it's up to Thrive to kind of work that out as well, being that they did not complete the initial clarification of what was going to happen and who was going to pay to keep the upkeep. I think that a lot of that responsibility needs to fall on them in some way or the other. And when, Amy, do you know when these conversations will start?
So they're going, Thrive is going in front of the New Communities Association in August.
And to be clear, the New Community Association is something that was created to oversee the public spaces in both Jeffrey Park down in Italian Village and Grant Park here. And there is a Wineland Park resident on that committee, but it's a mixture. It's a structure that the city sets up to oversee the creation of these places that are supposed to be city amenities, but are being paid for by private developers. And so the representatives on that little group are a mixture of representatives from the developer, lawyer from the city, and representatives from the city, and supposedly representatives from the neighborhood. And so we worked over the past couple of years to get a Wineland Park resident actually on that committee. I'm not sure that that's confirmed yet, but it's supposed to be this hybrid group that represents neighborhood residents and the city and the developer to make decisions together about how to spend the money for these facilities. So it's
Yeah, and Steve was trying to explain the New Communities Association to the group, and it just was confusing, and it was a lot. So I will reach out to Thrive and copy Civic on it and Laura as well. And then I don't want to take up too much time, but again, for the open seat, if anyone has any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. We have so it's myself and Brian Williams, who's also a neighbor in Wineland Park. And so we would really love to fill that third seat, just so we have full representation for Wineland Park. So again, thanks for having me on. I'm gonna sign off because I have to put my little one to bed. So please do not hesitate to contact me.
Thanks so much, Amy, for sharing this with us. And thank you for your report of the University Area Commission as well. Okay, well, is Ray here for the compost? Are you ready, sir?
Yeah, he's on the line here.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you? We can hear you.
I'm good. Okay, great. And what is your name?
My name is Tanya Long.
Okay. And I'm only familiar with Chris.
I'm on here too.
Okay.
Tanya
there you
is
go.
our
Hey,
president. Hello.
How you doing, Chris?
Good.
Okay,
it's nice
so
seeing you.
you too. I made it this time.
Yeah.
Yes, welcome.
So
Welcome.
ask questions.
Ray, do you want to just give us like a quick intro of your service that
Okay.
you're offering?
Okay, so I own the company called the Compost Exchange, where I've been here in Columbus about 4 years now. I started this in Athens, Ohio, and had an EPA licensed facility there. Had one here in Columbus until May of last year. I was partners here. But currently I do residential food scrap recycling, collection recycling. And we currently have 8 drop-off booths. We have over 1,000 members doing that at the different farmers markets and 2 Whole Foods, and that happens on weekends. And then today we had started one in New Albany on Thursday. But during the week we go collect curbside from about 600-700 residents. All of our resident customers are west of I-71. So from Powell, Worthington, Clintonville, your neighborhood, German Village, Marion Village, and then we go east a little bit. But we do that on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So the idea was to kind of jumpstart getting more neighborhoods involved, is to offer a neighborhood like yours, up and coming and real progressive, a free 10-week curbside composting pilot program. And I'm the fellow who launched and organized and managed the program in Bexley in 2018 and 19. I did that, and it went from 250 to over 1,000 members in a year and a half. So that's
Oh,
the
wow.
offer. It's really simple program. Everybody gets a bucket. We come I'll be there. I'm the guy in the van. I'll be there every Tuesday to swap liners. And the only requirements are that folks who say they're interested to try this, ideally they would be folks who would make at least half of their meals at home. They would fresh prep half of their meals at home, so as to get the folks who generate the most food scraps. And so at the end of the pilot, everybody turns their bucket in, and each person who participates would get a short questionnaire to answer and to determine what they liked, what they didn't like, and how to model and maybe custom fit a program for the neighborhood. And then, after that point, they're welcome to join up. Maybe your association would like to do a neighborhood-wide program that everybody can have. I'm not sure how that would be funded, but currently it's a subscription service. So folks who are interested sign up as a subscriber, and it's really quite simple on purpose. Last year, 90,000 tons of food scraps went to the landfill from residents of this county, this area. And so my mission is to get all those 90,000 tons to be put in my yellow bucket, which you see a copy of behind me, right? Versus the trash can landfill. It's that simple. And so the big challenge is having the infrastructure in place so that people can, and once they understand why they should, and we're real big on education of that issue, and that's really the key thing to get people to understand is, why should I? Well, I have a whole page of stuff that explains that. And so once they understand that, then the issue is make it easy, make it convenient, and make it pretty cheap. And we've done that too. So that's the Cliff Notes version. Go ahead.
Ray, what's the total number of members you said you had?
Total for curbside is over 500. Total for drop-off is over 1,000.
Cool.
I just pasted into the chat, Ray, the details where you said you're looking for like 25 to 50 participants, that the 10-week pilot program would start Tuesday, August 4th.
Yeah, how many folks live in your neighborhood? How many folks? Any idea?
What is it, like 4,000?
Oh, that many. Okay.
I think we have about 4,000 residents.
I got you. And is there a map that kind of defines the geographic boundaries of the neighborhood?
If you know the Columbus area, our northern boundary would be Chittenden or 11th.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then we go west to High Street.
Okay.
To the one of the railroad tracks is at CSX or
yeah.
And then to the south, 5th Avenue.
Yeah. I grew up on 14th when I was a kid.
Okay.
Back in the 60s, so I know the neighborhood real well.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. So that's the idea. It's quite simple. There's no limit to the number of people who can sign up, just so that they're the type that are, qualified, quote unquote, in terms of, interested, serious. The one rule of thumb is that the folks who are participants, they're required to put their bucket out every week. I do a similar program for OSU every semester in the fall and the spring for the last 2 years. And we get about 100 people, and the student government pays me to do the program. And by and large, about 15% of the folks never participate. They get all excited initially, oh yeah, great. Then they realize that it has to be managed. It takes some work to participate. You have to, be conscious of where you put your stuff and how much. And so I always look for people for these programs, for these neighborhoods, to be serious and to be folks that actually do generate a good amount of food scraps, so we can have a good measurement and good experience and good feedback for everybody at the end. But it's totally free, and there's no promotion during the program. I won't be there, Facebooking. I don't even know how to use Facebook, but because I'm an old guy. But there's no promotion, sign up, none of that crap. It's just, a very simple program that I'm interested in getting people to realize just how simple this really is to do. So that in 5 years, when we look back, thinking, gee, though, Pete, now we're capturing hopefully 75% of all those 90,000 tons are going to someplace useful and not to the landfill. And that's the objective, is to get people, if it takes neighborhood by neighborhood, that's what I'm going to do. To roll this out, give the program away free for a while, and the people will see how easy it is. And the folks who try it will tell others who are skeptical. Those, like I did in Bexley. I'm the guy that developed that Bexley program, and that's why it worked. Was that people told other people. The word of mouth was key.
Chris, would you be able to paste that same information into something on the Wineland Park discussion forum on Facebook? That would make sense.
He gave me a pretty detailed like qualifying criteria, how the program works, contact information. He does have a website as well, so I can share all that on our Facebook page and the discussion forum. Ray, the best contact information is just the Ray, is it Leard?
It is, yes.
Okay, at thecompostexchange.com. So I pasted that in the chat too. Ray, just a question I have is, in your urban neighborhoods, we have alleys, so that's where we have trash in the back of our homes.
Right.
So you generally pick up the buckets in the front of the home or in the back?
It makes no difference. In the case of a pilot, it would be great to have it be consistent.
Okay.
That I don't really care. I have a few customers that for whatever reason they've asked me to come to their back door or side, and it really makes no difference. Just so it's consistent, so that whether it's me driving or other drivers that might be on the route that day, that they find the buckets in the same spot week to week to week, so that there's no confusion, or we get a call. We don't get calls that you missed us, and but things happen. We realize that, and speaking of that, if somebody does call and there's an issue, I always go get it. I mean, always go get it. Either the same day or the day after. And there's like in those directions or the criteria, it does say by 8 o'clock the buckets need to be put out. In some cases in the past, people have gotten used to when I come to their street, right? And so it might be 11, 1, 2 o'clock, and then the driver changes. So, but then they call me, well, you missed us this week. I'm going, what time did you put it out? Oh, 1 o'clock when you always come, or right before. I'm going, it's 8 o'clock. It's 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So no matter who's driving, it has to be, put out by 8 o'clock, so that, things work real smooth. It's a really a kind of a team effort. That at home, and this is the amazing part for me, is that, this is an aside thing. I rarely get any junk in the buckets ever. I mean, honestly, I'm known as the clean food scrap guy at the processing plant, because my stuff is super clean. And so that, it's hats off to you guys that do this at home, because you're doing it 24/7. It's just something. It's just amazing.
Did you say there's a subscription that people would have to pay to have this picked up weekly?
Ray, I think you
I think he's muted.
I think you're good. Here, let me see.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a subscription, you said, that people would have to pay to have it picked up?
Normally there's a subscription. Yeah, somebody has to pay for the service, but for the pilot, of course, there's no subscription. No. And there's no promotion of the subscription during the pilot. I'm just, like I said before, I'm just trying to get people to realize how easy it is, and the benefits, and that there is a value to it. And most of the folks, like as a part of the subscription, just to let you know, people often ask, do we get some compost back? Well, the answer is yes. When you renew your subscription, you get a 7-pound portion upon request. And
nice.
But most folks don't do it for that reason. Most folks do it because they know they should, and there's this convenient, consistent service that's out there, us, and that they do it willingly. Not everybody does it. Some people are on a tighter budget, but it's relatively inexpensive to, and the more people that we have, the lower that cost will go. And that's the whole idea from my point of view. I'm not doing this to make a fortune or make money at all. I'm doing it because it needs done. And like, I'm almost 70 and I'm one of 11 kids. And my siblings are all saying, Ray, it's time to quit. You know, I'm going, got one last thing to do. And this is the one thing is the next 4 years, I'm going to roll this out one way or another. This is going to happen for Columbus. So that's the mission, is to get people to start doing it and then have the city finally wake up and say, we should do this. And I understand that they are. In about 2 or 3 years, they will roll out something, the SWACO will, that will maybe put my business out of business. Okay, fine. I don't care. You know, I really don't. And, you know, we do make a little bit of money. We pay the bills, but it isn't designed to make money for the, you know, in a big picture kind of way. It's designed to get this thing off of square one. And, you know, people from Seattle or San Francisco, they move in the area and they're asking me, well, what's up, Ray? Why isn't everybody doing this? You know, where's the composting? Because they're used to it out there. And so it'll eventually come to Columbus. It'll eventually become part of our taxes that it's paid for by, you know, once the infrastructure is in place. And I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but the place where I take this is a prison out in London that they have a training program for the inmates. And eventually there'll be 5 prisons that circle the city outside 270. And that's where at least half of the food scraps that are now generated, that's the capacity they'll have within 2-3 years. That's what's happening now. And so maybe that's what the city's waiting for. I don't know. But anyway, that's that part of it. And so what else you want to know?
And you
I'm going to
did say
post
that you would get
the
an informational flyer out, correct?
I'm going to post it here in the chat, and I'll post a link on the Facebook page too. So if you
Okay,
guys look in
someone
the
asked
chat,
for it.
there's a PDF. Yeah, that was Tyler.
Yeah.
Well, we already
Okay.
emailed you, so looking forward to hearing back.
It's nice to know that
Yes.
one can experiment with this and like see if they like it or don't like it for a little while
Right.
this year.
Yeah, in Bexley, we
Yeah.
did it for a year. We did it for a whole year before City Council approved it for the city. I think that's much too long to have somebody figure it out whether they like it or not. And so 10 weeks kind of felt good. The August 4th launch date and then the ending in October kind of spans the summer and then going into the fall, but before the holidays and all that stuff and the weather. So it's a good time frame, I think. 10 weeks kind of felt right. And yeah, so that's why it was chosen that way. Not that it has to be August 4th. It could be next spring. It doesn't matter. But, the timing's good. And then there's plenty of time to get ready for it. You guys figure out a way to tell the people that they're there and,
Okay, so I guess we will work on getting that information out there and informing the residents so that everyone that wants to have the trial can do this.
Yep,
and,
sure, that'd be great.
Become familiar with it.
Yep.
Do you have a deadline date in mind for responding to participate?
Well, the middle of July, there's plenty of time. If I knew for sure one way or the other by the middle of July, if everybody had time to respond one by one, and if I got 25, 30, or 40 by then, I'd do it. And if I got 10 more, 20 more, 30 more by the 4th, no problem. I got plenty of buckets. By the way, the buckets are recycled pickle buckets that I collect from area restaurants. So that's recycled as well. So, but yeah, it's not that many. And if it was 1,000, that might be an issue. But if it's going to be a 50 to 100 total, that's no problem at all to react rather quickly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll share the information on social media and have them reach out to you.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
Thank you.
For
Thank
having
you
me.
so much, sir. Thank you so much.
You have a great neighborhood. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
We like it. Okay. So Chris did post the PDF of everything that you would want to know. I just downloaded it right into my file, so I'll get a chance to look at it later. If you want to do that, please feel free. And does anyone have any more questions about that before Jennifer begins her presentation?
I was gonna give a quick comment. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So 4th Street Farms has this gigantic pile of rotten vegetables and whatnot that anybody can dump on. Roger is giving a thumbs up. So most neighborhoods are not really that excited about having a gigantic pile of rotten garbage, and not garbage,
Right.
but vegetables, because it kind of smells a little bit. But we're very
Yeah.
fortunate that we have 4th Street Farms that people seem not to mind. So anybody can walk their vegetables over there and dump it on the pile. So
Well, that's
no
good to
questions
know,
there.
too.
All right.
But no one's going to
That's
come
good to
pick
know.
rotten vegetables up at your house.
Yeah, right.
Good to know, though, really. But it's good to also to know why you should do it, and may spark some interest. And it's our duty to put it out there for those that may want it. So. Thanks, Chris. Jennifer, where'd you go? Oh, there you are, darling. You ready?
All right, hey guys. I haven't seen anyone in a while. First, I would like to thank everybody that came out and helped me and my family with food and toiletries and stuff like that when we were sick, because that was very helpful. Some of you might know, but some of you don't know. Me and Kawhi and Empress were very, very sick at the beginning of March. So I really appreciate your help with that. And I'm glad that we are such great neighbors. So the program that I want to do through the youth development, it's not really a program. It's more like, if anyone remembers how Miss Charity Rose used to do Saturday mornings at the 4th Street Farms to do reading with the children. I would like to utilize the free libraries that are around Wyland Park to create story time. Since places like the library and things like that are not open yet. And I believe we have enough space around majority of the libraries to go ahead and start an idea of reading with the kids, just trying to introduce more literature for children, especially because it's the summer and a lot of kids are not getting that exposure to reading, as well as babies that are under 1. A lot of parents don't read to them as well. So I want to kind of create a way for, babies to be in strollers and maybe, kids on blankets on the sidewalk or in the grass to be able to do story time. So I kind of like in the middle of wanting to do something. I have kids myself, and I feel like that it would be very beneficial for them as well as us to get to know the children that are in the neighborhood that are new or that are old or that, maybe came in the middle of COVID. But I really want the idea to be able to share the books with our neighbors. That's really what I want to do. Is to share the books. I have a whole collection of books. I use my books for my Zooms for my job with the Moms to Be program as well. So I switch out as much as I can. The one here by my house. But I want to be able to set up story times throughout the weekends. Like maybe, one Saturday we meet at 2 different times and 2 different locations. But again, giving it the space for COVID. I know a lot of parents I'm one of those parents, I'm very weary about going out and frequently going out and being around large crowds and things like that. And I feel like the children are getting stir crazy because there's not much for them to do. There's no hoops at the park. They continuously tape up Wyland Park's playground areas and things like that.
Hey, Jennifer.
Yeah.
How would you invite children to the event?
Kind of how we do with the Civic, just word of mouth, or setting up like how we used to have like a newsletter for the OXU extension.
What time of day do you think would be best to do it if we did it like on a Saturday?
Probably after 2 or 3, depending on the heat, because a lot of parents are going to want to be out early in the morning with their kids. But that's only the few. I've only talked to like maybe 5 moms, and they're like, that's not a good, 9 or 10 o'clock isn't a good time to walk with the kids. That's when I, have to work or whatever. So I'm thinking after 3, like kind of like the time that they would be getting out of school at Wyland would be my ideal time.
Well, it might be really hot during that time, but I'm sure we could work on the time. I just think it's a wonderful idea. I know I used to volunteer to go to Camp Mary Orton to read to the kids that were at camp, and it was one of the most fun times. And you would think with all the technology and kids being on screen time that they wouldn't be interested, which was one of my concerns, and they absolutely loved it. They loved sitting there and being read to. And the babies, I think, would enjoy it as well. Even if you had like picture books for them, you could maybe have opportunities to read the babies maybe earlier. You know, I think we could try it early, and we could try, you know, an evening too.
Yeah, that's
you
what I was
know,
thinking.
maybe
Like
later.
Something like, I'm not set on times. I don't work on the weekend, so any type of suggestions or any type of help would work. It doesn't matter.
So Jennifer, I'd like to host one here since I've got a little free library in front of my house. By afternoon, I do have full shade.
Yeah.
So we can talk offline about what that would look like. And I'd like to, you know, offer snacks and drinks and whatever. And maybe for all the kids that come, they can leave with a book. So
yeah.
let's talk about that.
And I host in my backyard as well. I don't have a free library, but I have little books.
Okay.
So,
you know,
I think that Michael will let us use his yard. So thank you, Michael.
Jennifer, for a kid.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to get more detail from you. So a kid hears about, or a parent hears about the story time. What happens before, during, and after? Tell me about like getting a book. Is the idea just to get them in front of a free little library?
Mm-hmm. So they know what it is. I mean, there's lots of, depending on what time you're out and if you're actually like walking around Violet, there are still kids out here that they're still out unsupervised. They're still like not able to like play in groups and things like that. So really, I want to just give them something positive to do. Because it's the summer, some of the kids will be, you know, maybe overwhelmed and tired. The summer camps are opening up this week, and next week. So, but that doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't change anything for the weekends, at least from what I can see as far as foot traffic with the younger ones. But it would more so be like, hey, can I go to story time with Miss Jen? Because that's really what it's going to be. It's going to be story time with Miss Jen. And if mom doesn't know, then she can get the information. I mean, I don't plan to have a bunch of children that are unsupervised, but I know I'll have at least 3 or 4.
Would you also, are you saying the park is taped up so you can't bring them to the park either, or you can take them to Wildland Park as well?
You could still use the park, but as far as like the equipment and things like that, they frequently tape it. The kids on the CPO, they always take it down, so it doesn't matter that they're putting it up. It's going to keep getting taken down.
The little free library that's in front of Wildland Park Elementary has a really dense little tree right next to it that has good shade in the afternoon.
Oh yeah, right in the front. But
right
you want to make sure they're not running into the street either.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure they're contained. So that's a little too close to the street for my comfort.
Yeah,
for little ones.
Really use that idea of on the side, like with the Gammon Guild, it would be on the side in the grass. And again, I can provide blankets to be able to just sit down with. I was thinking popsicles, but Michael's got an idea of doing some snacks and stuff. I was just like some popsicles, a quick story. Not really a high and buy, but like, because a lot of the kids that are out now, they don't know each other. So it's a way for them to get to know each other. And also for the new moms and residents here, they don't know anything about the civic. So hopefully we can attract some people by pulling their kids in. I'm really good at like getting people to do stuff out of their norm. So hopefully this works and it doesn't crash with too many people. But we'll see.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Anybody have any questions?
I just want to say that I think it sounds like a great idea, and I think a great way to
Yes.
neighbors. And I think Jennifer's perfect person to do it. So
Thanks,
yes,
Laura.
good
Yes,
idea.
So do I. And again, I would like to offer my backyard as well, and I will provide snacks, and you know me, so it would be a lot of fun. I'd love to help read too.
So after Matt and Tyler and I have one in our front yard, I think Matt and Ashley Martin's front porch would be a great place to do into.
Oh,
I was
Ashley.
thinking, I mean, since there's so many locations being said, I mean, maybe alternating throughout the neighborhood would be a good idea. I mean, you know, getting kids from different areas to come, you know, because it could be 2-3 blocks away for some and then 5 or 6 for others.
Hey, Cowboy, when was the last time you guys heard the ice cream truck through the neighborhood? We were just talking about, I haven't seen an ice cream truck in a while.
I haven't. I still haven't yet.
It was last summer, Coway.
I know, I haven't
know.
seen one this year.
Not this year, though.
I'll
I
find
want
one and I'll convince them to come by. I need a Ninja Turtle popsicle anyway.
I want the ice cream
Oh,
truck
wow.
in story time.
No, I missed the soft serve ice cream. That's what I missed.
Ooh.
Right? Remember those? Or am I telling my age?
I'm sorry, I don't remember those. I'm still bomb pops and candy cigarettes, so I have no idea.
Oh, honey, you're missing out. Sprinkles? Yes. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That's really awesome. And I'm sure we'll all have an opportunity to get with you and kind of flesh this out a little bit more so that we can get this started. Did you have a time when you wanted to start it? Caught you in the middle of a chew, sorry.
I'm joking now. Trying to make dinner real
Oh,
quick.
sorry.
But yeah, I want to try within like another week, a week or two, while the weather's still warm. Because with Columbus, it could snow like on Wednesday next week, right? So.
We're in summer, so let's hope not. Within a week or two?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, within a week or two.
All right. Well, keep me posted so we can get the word out there and kind of help look for babies and kids that might benefit from this. And, you know, getting them to helping children to really be introduced to the love of reading. You know, that's the most important thing. So just because you're at home doesn't mean you can't go away on an adventure through a book, right? Some of my best summer memories were in my backyard, drinking lemonade and reading the Nancy Drew mysteries or the Hardy Boys and things like that. So, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And we'll move on. I see we have City Councilman Rob Dorans on. Hello, Mr. Dorans. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Good evening.
And also Kevin McCain from my staff has joined as well. Kevin, if you want to.
I see.
There
Hello, Kevin. How are you? Okay. Rob, would you like to just tell them a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and then get into your topic, please?
Absolutely. So first of all, hello, neighbors. So I actually live up on 4th Avenue between 4th Street and Summit. So I'm just about a block away from many of you all, or a few blocks away. So Italian Village and Wineland Park, I feel like bleeds together quite easily. So it's good to be with neighbors here tonight. So again, my name is Rob Dorans. I'm a member of Columbus City Council. I chair the Public Utilities Committee, the Technology Committee, and the Neighborhoods Committee on Council. And one of the reasons that we were asked to join this evening is to talk a little bit about some of the city's regulation around short-term rentals in Columbus and some legislation that we're looking at to hopefully improve some of that regulation moving forward. As I know, these are becoming more and more prevalent within not only our neighborhood, but also across the Short North and pretty much across the city. I know actually about a week or two ago, we actually had a new one open up on my block. So some of the issues that folks have run into, I actually got a firsthand view of the last few weeks. So certainly understand some of the tensions and concerns that have happened. But want to talk a little bit about that, then certainly turn it over to folks to ask questions, one about short-term rentals or certainly anything that's going on with the city right now, since between COVID right now and a lot of the different issues we're dealing with on public safety reform. Certainly whenever I have an opportunity to chat with a group like this, want to make sure I am open have the ability to answer, questions that folks may have about what's going on with the city. So going back a couple years, our code actually did not really have a good place to regulate short-term rentals. And short-term rental just applies to Airbnbs, VRBO, anything that, all these different platforms that exist. So one of the, there's my dog. One of the things that we've done is we put in a more stringent both registration process for rentals. Up until a few years ago, you could open up a short-term rental in Columbus and you didn't have to register with the city whatsoever. So we had no idea where these rentals were, whether or not they were being operated safely, where they were being operated within neighborhoods. So there was a registration process that was put in place. Late last year, we put an additional change to our code into place that required a background check for the owners and anyone who would have access to the unit. This was to ensure sort of guest safety, that, if folks were renting out these properties, that they were doing so and weren't necessarily exposing, folks that, maybe had, issues in the past that may not, bode well for hosting people within their home. One of the things that we have absolutely seen over the past 6+ months is sort of the proliferation of, for lack of a better term, sort of party houses. And this has happened, unfortunately, where folks have rented a short-term rental, and it's not folks coming into town for, a football game or to visit family or what have you. It's people who, want to have a large gathering. And this actually was exacerbated even more during COVID. But they don't want to have it at their own home. So there's not necessarily, it's not being used as a sort of standard hotel room. It's used more as an event space. And that has created a number of sort of neighborhood issues sort of across the city between trash and noise and some other issues. Right now, since we have a registration process in place within our code, people can go ahead and file complaints with the city if there's an Airbnb operating in their neighborhood that they're having issues with. Now, unfortunately, our code currently does, it's reactive. So when those permits come up for renewal, the city can then determine to not renew that permit based upon issues that have come up in the city. So we can talk about a whole year of headaches for folks going by before the city is really empowered to take any action. So we're looking at legislation to give licensing at the city a little bit more teeth. So if, again, there's sort of an immediate issue that's happening, we can, as a city, revoke the permit and then provide some type of remedial issues to hopefully get those folks to either operate correctly or tell them that, hey, look, like, you've tried, but apparently you're not able to operate this property safely within a neighborhood. The other thing we're doing right now is creating a map. So there's going to be an interactive map that gets posted with the city. Right now, the question often becomes, like, I think a lot of, obviously, if you're on this call, a lot of your own neighbors because you've taken the time to introduce yourself and become part of the community. But oftentimes you'll have an apartment or a house and you don't quite know who lives there for a variety of reasons, and you're not quite sure if it's short-term rentals. You don't quite know whether you're supposed to file a complaint with 311 or the city on it, or whether it's folks who are visiting or what have you. So we're actually building a website with the Department of Technology that would be an interactive map, so folks could actually see where these short-term rentals are within neighborhoods. So again, most of our short-term rentals have been good property owners. People have done the right thing. But those who haven't, part of the issue is not finding out, where these actual properties are. So, one of the things that happened this past week was when I found out this one was operating down the street from me and some neighbors contacted me about the issue that was going on, I got on the Airbnb website and sort of zoomed into my neighborhood to see, is this a short-term rental or not, right? So I was able to find that and sort of deal with the issue. But I think from a city's perspective, we want to make sure that we're empowering residents to make sure that they understand what is happening in their neighborhood. And if there's an issue, who appropriately to go talk to. So we're considering some legislation that we're working with the city attorney's office that hopefully will balance the ability for the short-term rentals to operate within Columbus, but also at the same time not detract from quality of life within neighborhoods. Because I know when I've traveled across the country, I've stayed in a lot of Airbnbs and really loved being able to experience different kinds of neighborhoods. But that said, that is different than, you know, having a property that's being exclusively used for a large event setting, which is not necessarily appropriate for neighborhoods. So we're trying to strike that balance, but we're trying to do so in a way in which we're sort of, you know, hopefully going to be empower residents to make sure that if there are things that are happening negatively within the neighborhood, that they have an appropriate place to file those complaints. And at the same time, the city then has the power, if we see a troubling trend with an individual rental, that we can then take action. So that's sort of the update on that. We'll probably be introducing legislation this fall on this topic, and certainly do a public hearing on it. And if, you know, folks have questions about, you know, this topic either today or later on, I'm going to go ahead and put my personal email in the chat function here. So that's just radorans@columbus.gov. And then Kevin, would you mind go ahead and put the website in the chat box for the short-term rental regulations? So if folks do have current issues, one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that we're pointing folks in the right direction. People are always welcome to contact 311 or my office, and we can certainly get those complaints to the right place. But we're also, as we sort of do more to regulate these types of rentals, we're wanting to push folks more towards the short-term rental website on the city that will have the map, that will have all the different guidelines for what should happen with these properties. So with that, questions about short-term rentals or, you know, anything else that's going on in the city.
I think the short-term rental office is closed right now temporarily.
The licensing division is closed right now. So we are currently looking at how to turn them back on. As I think most folks have dealt with COVID, the city moves probably 80+% of its operations online to work from home. And one of the consequences of that was the division of licensing has not been in the permit renewal process. So complaints can still be filed, but the issue is that there's basically been a grandfather period. So if registrations are coming up for renewal, we're not taking any action on those currently, because the licensing division, currently you have to come in person to deliver some of the paperwork, and they're just not able to do that at this time.
I had a comment that was a little bit off topic, so if other people want to comment on the short-term thing, please go ahead before me.
I kind of wanted to ask a couple questions about the short-term thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so a little over a year ago, I actually was gone for a little while, and I did do some Airbnb rentals. I couldn't get a sense of what people were going to do here, and I was actually shocked when my friend who was cleaning up after them told me that there were parties happening in the house. You know, I didn't have any sense from my interactions with them that was what was going to happen. So I guess at one level, I wonder, you know, how much do the owners know? The other question I have is, like, is the problem just more generally that, you know, our neighborhoods, like, are having houses that are entirely given over to short-term rentals? And, you know, like, is there a way to really, like, find that middle balance if in fact the problem is that, like, that there are just houses that aren't residential, in fact, and that are just hotel rooms, but that, you know, are sort of rotating, you know, visitors on all of our blocks or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question, Roger. I mean, I think part of it is, so no host is ever going to be able to 100% fix every single issue if there's with guests. However, when we've seen sort of significant long-term problems with party houses or, you know, significant trash, whatever, it is houses that are equipped for sort of those kind of situations. So we've seen on the south side, you know, literally the one that's around the corner from my house. So, you know, it's a 3 or 4 bedroom house that has, you know, bunk beds throughout the entire place. So it's a, you know, a single family house that would be probably most appropriate for 3 or 4 or 5 people to live in. But it, you know, it's advertised as sleeping 15 or 16 people. You know, that is sort of inviting, you know, lots of people in a place that may not be most appropriate for it. So again, when you talk about, you know, an owner is never going to be able to control, you know, every individual act of the folks that are renting it. There's also owners that are sort of setting themselves up for some of these issues. One of the things that some of the folks that have had issues, they've installed, more security systems to basically more in real time understand the amount of people who are coming in and out. That's certainly not something we're mandating, but that's been one of the solutions that folks have talked about. And I think to your broader question, Roger, about sort of that appropriate balance between the amount of short-term rentals within a neighborhood. I mean, frankly, this is like an affordable housing issue, right? So every time if a house is taken out of the residential market, that puts pressure back on the residential market, right? So rent prices, house prices could increase simply because we've taken what normally would be, a rental or house that would be available to a resident, and we put it into sort of this daily commercial market. Some cities have considered, have actually instituted caps on the amount of short-term rentals that are allowed within cities or allowed within certain neighborhoods. One of the more, one of the more aggressive examples of this is New Orleans. In the French Quarter, they have a certain cap on the amount of short-term rentals that are able to operate within that area. Because while I love New Orleans, I love visiting there, I love the French Quarter, there's actually people who live there and they actually want it to be a residential neighborhood in addition to a good place to visit. So that's, something that we haven't necessarily, gotten to yet. But I think what we've tried to do in Columbus, and we've tried to be proactive about the amount of regulation on this, where this is like a new issue when this popped up. So literally 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't even have a process in place to determine or register these things. So we're sort of building these codes from the ground up. So this is actually an example of government trying to be more proactive than reactive. But we're not, we're constantly trying to get it more right than wrong. So these are some of the issues that we're certainly dealing with. Laura?
It's tempting to think that the mapping would allow you to start to think about what's an acceptable number of Airbnbs or short-term rentals on a given street, for example.
Right. And one of the things that we've actually dealt with, which is really, really frustrating, is that so the code requires folks to have a permit in order to have a short-term rental. And I don't certainly mean to accuse folks who are operating these things of all being negative and doing things the wrong way. But we've had folks who've posted fake permit numbers and then have posted on short-term rental Facebook groups, host groups, about how you can get through these sort of loopholes in order to have them on there. So the one that was around the corner from my house, they had a short-term rental permit posted on their Airbnb website, but it was fake. So they just made up numbers and put it on there. So, I mean, when we talk about sort of that mapping, so one of the things that we're actually going to do with the Department of Technology is sort of do an overlay. So here's where the ones are registered, and here we're actually looking at VRBO and Airbnb, and here's where they say these are. And one of the things that's been somewhat frustrating to deal with and certainly Kevin from my staff can talk a little bit more to this, is that we're dealing with these Silicon Valley, multi-billion-dollar companies. And we've had some difficulty in getting them to adhere to some of our regulations. And frankly, we actually had, when we went through with the background check, we had Airbnb almost threatened to pull out of Columbus, which I thought was completely ridiculous. And I did not think that they were going to do that. But they certainly threatened to do so. But we thought, hey, look, we need to pass this legislation. We're going to do so. And sure enough, there's enough money on the table for them to continue to operate within Columbus. And I think when we talk about regulation, when we talk about where it's appropriate and how much we need to do on this, again, as long as there's money to be made for these folks here, they're going to be here. But I think at all times, we need to strike the balance between public safety and then at the same time, sort of neighborhood integrity, so that it's just not an entire neighborhood of rentals or short-term rentals. Chris?
Question. So I think at one time it was mentioned that the city was looking to maybe cap the number of days that a rental would be available in a year. Mm-hmm. Is that something that still would be considered, where that might deflect the number of properties being full-time Airbnbs and more residents that live in the neighborhood and maybe sort of renting based on when they're not available, when they're not at their home?
Right. So this was getting back into the discussion specifically around what constitutes a short-term rental versus just a rental in general. Mm-hmm. And to your point, there's a bit of that dividing line of So long-term corporate housing in which someone's going to live there for 6+ months or something, you know, that's more stable than someone's going to be there for 2 nights, right? And actually, I think, Kevin, you probably know a little bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, originally when we started looking at this legislation probably 4 years ago, that was our original proposal from the city, was to cap it at, I think it was maybe 54 or 55 weeks in a year or something, and it was 2 days a week. And we were kind of told that that probably would not legally hold up in court. We know some other cities have done that, but that was sort of, that kind of fell by the wayside. And that was working with Airbnb. That was a policy proposal that at the time, Councilmember Stinziano decided to go against. And so that was originally in our original proposal, but it was not, we weren't able to get that signed off on.
I think, Chris, to your point, so as I said, I think weirdly we have, I think we've passed 3 or 4 different pieces of legislation specifically around short-term rentals over the past 3 years. That is an unusual amount of legislation to pass around these kinds of things. I think it's a recognition of like, this is constantly a moving target in which we need to sort of get things, better. That's something that I think, when I think we've all visited cities, if we've utilized these, in which you see it almost an entire apartment building that's just short-term rentals, right? And I don't think that's what anyone necessarily wants to see in various parts of Columbus, because again, a neighborhood of visitors is not a neighborhood. At that point, it's a hotel, right? And there are hotels for that kind of thing. It's certainly something that we can look at in the future. I think we're going to continue to look at the code. Like the legislation we're gonna work on to introduce in the fall is in response to some of these direct safety issues and sort of neighborhood issues. But I think we're going to continually monitor, and especially I think to Laura's point, as we start to actually be able to track these better from a perspective of we actually have a real-time database of where these are cropping up. I think that's going to spur the discussion of, what is the time period that these qualify as a short-term rental, but also like how much is appropriate for a certain zip code? Because again, at the end of the day, this very, very, very quickly becomes a housing issue, an affordable housing issue.
Do these properties pay taxes on short-term rental, or is it just sort of tax-free?
So that was actually one of the first pieces of legislation. So these folks were, basically getting around the hotel motel tax. So, basically the short-term rentals had a competitive advantage over traditional hotels because they didn't have to charge those taxes. And some of them were actually charging those taxes and just pocketing it themselves. And I don't know if folks know, but our hotel motel tax here in Columbus, one of the primary sources of those taxes goes towards our human services grants at the city of Columbus. So it's those taxes go towards human services, they go towards the Greater Columbus Arts Council, and they go towards Experience Columbus, which is our tourism bureau. And again, before that original regulation was put into place, there was nothing to collect those taxes. So Kevin may know a little bit more than I do. This is certainly pre-COVID, but within the first year of having that regulation in place, we saw hundreds of thousands of dollars flow to the city that otherwise was just sort of lost, primarily supporting the arts and the human services.
Yeah, another big area that the hotel motel tax goes to is the Affordable Housing Trust. And so by capturing all of the rentals and the stays of folks staying at Airbnbs as opposed to our hotels downtown, that brought in, I believe, a few hundred thousands of dollars in tax revenue that, like the council member said, would normally not have gone to our Affordable Housing Trust, to some of the other areas that hotel motel bed tax goes to. So requiring all our Airbnbs to pay the hotel motel bed tax has been a very big help for a lot of the human services funding.
Rob, do you have any idea when the map will be live, that interactive map that shows where all the properties are?
So we literally had a meeting about this today. So we're working with the Department of Technology and the City Attorney's Office. There's some legalities around making sure that we're posting, it's all public information, but we're doing so in a way that is most appropriate to protect some of the property owners as well. But Kevin, do you have a estimate on when we were really close to getting this done, and then COVID happened, and then the Department of Technology had to shift thousands of workers to work from home overnight. So we got a little bit set back on that because the city had to deal with that all overnight like everyone else did. But Kevin, do you have a timeline?
Yeah, the map was almost ready to go. The problem, I think somebody alluded to earlier, I heard, was that the Division of Licensing is, for all intents and purposes, sort of closed right now, and there's no way to renew things online. And so unfortunately, it doesn't look like the map is going to be able to go live until the Division of Licensing is able to be open for at least 2 weeks or 30 days to process all of the permits that have
basically the renewals.
The renewals, right.
Yeah.
And so as soon as we're able to do that, which we're hoping, fingers crossed, can happen in the fall, and then get everybody renewed, and then we would be able to get all that data online. So the map is pretty much ready to go. It's just a matter of when the Division of Licensing is going to be able to open to start processing those licenses again.
This will be a small plug. So if anyone follows me on Twitter or on Facebook, when we get that ready to go, we'll be sure to be posting that to make sure that we'll also be sending it out to all the area commissions, as many of the civic associations that we have contact information for.
Are the property owners, are they being required to follow any guidelines through COVID?
Great question. So the city does not have any specific requirements. So a lot of the short-term rental operators have implemented certain guidelines for cleaning. Early on, they were requiring certain days between guests. But that is not something that currently the city regulates. I know we had a question from someone in the chat box about homeowners applying for a license. Are they asked or told a maximum occupancy? That is not something that's within the code right now. There's actually something that's working with the city attorney right now to determine whether or not that could be something that could be implemented. And it's a little bit of a complicated process, but I know Kevin's done some work on this as well, so I'll let him speak to it.
It is actually, so it is a question on the application. When a host goes to the Division of Licensing, and you can see on our website, the application is there. Folks do need to list the maximum occupancy as well as the number of bedrooms that are available. The problem right now is that the housing code is extremely complicated, and there is a math formula that is not very easy for folks to figure out. And so that is where we're struggling right now, is that we know that there is a formula. You have to measure the square footage of a bedroom, divide it by the number of people, and then add that with all the bedrooms. So it's very complicated. We know that people aren't doing it, and we sort of feel it's unreasonable to expect people to do it. So for right now, on the application, the maximum occupancy is a required space that you need to fill out. We're hoping that that can make it onto the short-term rental website. Right now, what we're doing is we're going back and forth with the city attorney's office as whether or not it's legal, because right now what we're basically doing is we're taking people at their word in good faith, because when you sign off on the application, you are signing that you have checked with the fire code, with the zoning code, with the building code, and you're basically signing an affidavit that you have done all of this. So in theory, on paper, that's the law. We know in practice, though, that's not really being followed.
And this is one of the reasons why we want to set up there's currently a way on the website to submit a complaint about a property that has too many people in it consistently. But this is one of the things that we're trying to do with sort of the active enforcement rather than just the reactive, the once a year, is that we're not going to be able to police, to be quite frank. If it's set up for 4 people and 5 people are staying there, we're just not going to be able to deal with that. Now, that said, if it's set up for 5 people and people in the neighborhood continually send in complaints and say, hey, there's 25 or 30 people there every other night, like that is where we're hoping to put in like good regulation where, again, people in the neighborhood can say, look, it's supposed to be 5 or it's supposed to be 4, if it's 5 or 6, it is what it is. But again, to ensure that overall it's not being set up for these just mass gatherings that a house is not built for. Now the short-term rental, has 15 bedrooms and they want to have 20 people over and stay there, fine. But I don't know a lot of those kind of properties with certainly in our area.
And we've also designed it so that if somebody puts on their application that they have a maximum occupancy of 19, but with 2 bedrooms, that's a red flag. And with the new legislation, we'll be able to, sort of toggle to, so that we can.
The way the regulation is currently set up is that a lot of times if a rental owner wants to be problematic and check all the boxes, they're gonna get their way through. Where this is setting up a much more of a way. So if licensure says, hey, look, we've looked at everything here and this does not pass the smell test, either you need to give us more information or we're just not going to give you the permit. And that's frankly where we need to go.
Or we can suspend their license. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions or any more?
This is great. So Kevin is the resident expert on short-term rentals in the city of Columbus. So I'm really glad that he was able to join us. I think I know like 80% of this. So I'm glad the last 20 we've got Kevin with us.
He's
been working on this since day one.
Somehow that happened. I am happy to share my contact information as well. But yeah, for the last 4 or 5 years, this somehow has landed on my plate, and happy to do it. It's very interesting. As we all know, it's a new technology, and so as we learn more about it, the code changes very often, as the council member alluded to. So I think, as like I said, I've been working on this for 3 or 4 years, and I feel like it's almost every week or every other week that something pops up that we never thought of before, because it's so new. So it's changing all the time.
We've got a little one joining us. Hello.
Oh. Yeah. So anyone have any other questions?
If we're done discussing Airbnbs or short-term rentals, I think I just want to say that I see that City Council is starting to act related to the way the police department has been behaving in Columbus, not just over the past month, but over the past decades. And I just want to urge City Council to really be decisive about this and to assert the rights of our citizens to be safe in our city. It's bad enough that my Black and brown neighbors can't be safe around police, but it's also bad that I can't call police to deal with the things that police should be able to deal with because it's not safe for my neighbors. And so it needs to be more urgent. And I'm glad to see that City Council is starting to act, and I hope it just remains urgent.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I appreciate you bringing that up. The last couple of weeks, obviously, whenever I've had the chance to zoom in with a community group, I've wanted to make sure that I have the opportunity to speak to this with folks, especially with what happened today. So I have been incredibly disappointed, and just to be very clear, with clear misconduct that has occurred over the past 3 weeks with the Division of Police. I think that there are instances in which it's been messy and there's been issues, but I think there's been very, very clear instances in which we've had misconduct. And from day one, I've asked folks that have experienced it, that have seen it, to report it in the avenues that we currently have set up. Those are not perfect, and we're going to change some of those. But what council did today is new. So, as the council president Hardin said today, we're the legislative branch of the government. We are we pass legislation, we pass budgets. We don't hire anybody, we don't fire anybody. But we pass legislation, we pass budgets, and that gives us significant authority to have to affect change on this subject. So we've committed to doing 4 things before July 31st, which is when we go on recess. Is one, next Tuesday there's going to be a hearing with the Finance Committee on demilitarizing the police force, which is going to primarily revolve around changing our purchasing code to limit the ability for the division to purchase certain things. And this is going to focus on President Obama's executive order that he put in place when he was president to prevent certain transfers of military-grade equipment to local police forces. Unfortunately, President Trump rescinded that executive order and renewed a lot of those transfers. As President Pro Tem Brown said today and says continually, we should not allow our police force to look or feel like an occupying force in any of our neighborhoods, and that's pretty low-hanging fruit. We need to do that. 2, we're going to look at banning no-knock or limited knock warrants, which is one of the reasons that Breonna Taylor was murdered in Atlanta. Or in Louisville, I'm sorry. And those are dangerous. They put both officers and people at risk, and we need to evaluate how we can either severely limit or get rid of those within our community. 3, something that I'm actually planning to lead is we're going to be codifying the mayor's executive order and having an outside agency review all instances of force that have occurred with the Division of Police. That's originally going to be underutilized in the Bureau of Criminal Investigation from the state of Ohio. As I said today, this is a short-term solution that needs a longer-term problem. We cannot have what looks and feels like just another law enforcement agency investigate another law enforcement agency. The question has always become, how do the police investigate themselves? And the very fact we have to ask that question points us to the systemic problems of that question and of, frankly, the systems that have been exposed over the past month, I think, to everyone in this community and across the country. We're also going to take a look at, for the first time, we're going to start our budgeting process earlier. So normally our budget for 2021, we'll have a budget that's introduced in late November, and then we'll pass it in February. We're actually going to start this work basically late this summer, early fall, in order to actually have the ability to start to look at how do we reimagine the frustration that folks have. So we're going to do some things we're going to get done before July 31st, with very concrete actions. And the last thing, I'm sorry, about those things we're going to get done before July 31st is looking at what one of the key recommendations from the Safety Advisory Commission was a morality clause to prevent any officer from being associated or affiliated with any kind of hate group, which is just, as common sense as one can have. But moving further, those are things that we're going to get done before July 31st, and we've made that public commitment, and we're expecting folks to hold us accountable to getting that done as well. But then moving to the longer term is the budget process. We talk about budgets being moral documents, and those things don't change overnight, nor should they. But the time is now to take a real hard look at evaluating how we do things. And one of the things that President Pro Tem Brown today mentioned was there are things that are going well in Columbus. Between the APPS program at the Columbus Parks and Rec, where we take at-risk youth and get them summer jobs and expose them to mentorship and job coaches, that's exactly where we want to put money into. We have, rather than just policing, we put money into the Urban League and another nonprofit that does violence intervention in certain neighborhoods. So when there's a shooting, rather than just sending police there afterwards, we also send social workers to go who are members of the community to go talk to folks about what happened to prevent retaliation. These are the kind of things that we want to look at as far as when we talk about reimagining what public safety looks like. We need to have that tough discussion. We need to do so out in the open and public. So all of these things that I've mentioned are going to have a component of a public hearing. So folks have been protesting, that folks have been contacting elected officials. The next step now, and I'm certainly not suggesting anyone should stop doing that. What we're asking folks to do now is come with us as we take direct legislative action. And, as I said, there's going to be some things we're going to get done on a short-term basis before July 31st to show folks that, one, these are things that we need to deal with, but to show folks that we're serious about this. But then there's going to be some long-term things as well that aren't going to happen overnight, but we need to have folks with us to tell us when we're getting something right, tell us when we're getting something wrong, and tell us what their thoughts are, because frankly, the 7 of us are, I think, dug in to making sure that we get this right for Columbus. We have an incredible moment in front of us, and we don't want to waste it. So, Laura, I appreciate you bringing that up, and certainly I don't hold myself out to be certainly perfect on this, but I've tried to do as much listening and learning over the past 3 weeks, like a lot of us have, and certainly going to continue to do so. But the time for us as a legislative and budgetary branch of the city of Columbus, we need to start doing some work, and I think we're going to over the next 4 to 5 weeks, show folks what that work looks like, and then say, come with us afterwards. We've got more work to do.
I'm really glad to see that. And I just want to make sure it's not lost in the chat box that I think there's a general sense among almost everyone I talk to that there's a fundamental rebalancing that has to happen between the police department, the police union, and the city, and the taxpayers who pay the police. And so I hope that the police contract coming up in December is also very much on the radar, as well.
Yeah,
as
I mean, to be very clear, the council doesn't negotiate the contract. However, we have a vote on it, and we've let the mayor know very clearly what our expectations are that we want to see within that contract. Fundamentally, one is a civilian review board that is eventually going to take the place of some of the independent investigations that we've talked about, and not just a civilian review board that has existed in other places, but one that actually has teeth, one that has professional staff, one that has subpoena power, one that has the ability to actually conduct investigation and to be very open and honest. So I've spoke with a number of folks today at our press conference about this, and I had a couple news stations ask me about, well, what do you think the police's response to this is going to be? Hey, I've chatted with folks at the FOP, I've chatted with officers. Frankly, some of them are really frustrated that when IAB clears them of wrongdoing, that no one believes that finding. So they have a problem with always being looked at from a situation of never being cleared of something. Now, at the same time, the community thinks the same thing. So we want to make sure that we put a process into place. We actually have something that's independent, that first of all, the community trusts. And if we've done that, and that says someone committed misconduct, and we're going to deal with that. But also, if we've truly got the public to buy in and say that we've done this the right way, when if that body clears someone of wrongdoing, then hopefully that also shows folks that, hey, that also didn't happen. So we've got a lot of work to do. To your point, Laura, there are things that are out. That this is not a siloed off conversation. There's lots of things that have to happen. But one of the things that I've been trying to talk about, and I think council today said with a very clear voice, is there are things within our power, and those things we're going to deal with. There are things that are outside of our power, and we're going to be advocates about that and ask and push for those things. But the things that are within our power, we're going to get to work and do.
Councilman, can I ask a question? Who controls the level of power that the FOP has? Is that kind of in that negotiational process with the mayor? Because that's an issue across the nation. The FOP need to have leverage.
So the state law actually creates collective bargaining rights for all public employees, whether they're police, fire, folks that are picking up the trash. That's where those collective bargaining rights come from. And I'm a union lawyer. At my other job, I'm a proud union supporter. That said, those contracts need to reflect, the community. They need to reflect the expectations that we have. Again, whether you're picking up trash or whether you're serving the public as a firefighter or police officer. So, those contracts, the state law specifically says what has to be in those contracts. Now you can go beyond what state law says. So, for instance, one of the things like the Civilian Review Board that we have to negotiate within the contract, state law does not say that a civilian review board is prohibited or has to be included in a collective bargaining agreement. At some point in history, someone negotiated that into the contract, probably decades ago. So, but because now it's in the contract, we have to go negotiate it out, or we have to negotiate that language to be different. So, one of the things I've talked about, so you speaking to the power of the FOP, I mean, they have as much power as the code gives them, and they have as much power as the city's going to grant. Now, again, the collective bargaining process is not it's not a linear thing. And again, as a union lawyer, I can talk your ear off all day long about how these things work. But I think, folks have been very clear about what the expectations are going to be going into those negotiations, and the contract expires at the end of this year. And also the way this works is that contract stays in place until a new one is signed. And that process can take 6-12 months. So this is certainly not something that's going to happen overnight either. And certainly, I think as contentious as it's likely to be for us to push some things that have not been pushed before, I would not expect that to be done at the beginning part of it, right? But I am somewhat hopeful. When we instituted body cams for police, the FOP was a partner to do so, and frankly, they were opposed to it to start. And a lot of officers say that the body cams are their best friends now, because they don't have to worry about who did what or who said what or what happened. Roll the tape. And if you would ask them 3 or 4 years ago, they would have had a very aggressive and different answer to that. And I'm hoping that an example like that leads them to a place in which they understand some of the reforms that have to happen are not just good for the community, they can be good for them too. And frankly, from my perspective, if folks don't want to do a job that has those kind of reforms put in place, then go find something else to do.
Awesome. Anyone else have any other questions?
This might be getting a little too far in the weeds. So if it is, feel free to, not answer it, I guess. But as we hear lawsuits come against CPD, it's my understanding that settlements that the police have to pay out for misconduct just come from the tax budget. Are there any discussions about I don't know, the police, that coming out of specifically the police budget, something that they have to eat? Because I don't like the fact that my tax dollars went to pay for a settlement to Stormy Daniels because a bunch of Trump-loving cops had a corrupt bus at a strip joint.
You and me both. That was, I had to vote on that settlement, and I still don't feel great about that, obviously. So we're dealing with a couple different issues, and Ashley, you're right. This gets a little bit into the weeds, and allow me to talk about the weeds for a moment, and then we can sort of talk about things a little bit more broad. But one of the things in dealing with that kind of issue is that we deal with something called qualified immunity. This is something that's granted to officers both on the state and federal level, which basically means that it's presumptively that an officer has acted within the authority of the state, so that we're then liable for the acts of that officer. So take it out of that context. Let's say an officer is just driving down the street and gets into a car accident. The city is liable for that car accident because the officer was acting as an agent, as an employee of the city at that point. Now, what happened? You can get around qualified immunity, but it's a pretty high legal standard to do so. Basically, we need to show that you were no longer acting in any way as a police officer in order for us to basically say that this person is personally liable for that lawsuit rather than the city. Unfortunately, that's a really high bar. And again, one of the things I'm trying to do is be very clear about what council and the city can do and what other folks have to do. This is something that needs to be solved on the state or federal level if we want to modify or get rid of qualified immunity. To your point about how do we pay those settlements out, I think that when we look at the budget process this year, there's going to be some discussions about how we go about holding the division accountable for some of these lawsuits. I've been on council for about 1.5 years. I have voted on too many of these lawsuits, and the settlements themselves. The reason that we do them is that when a settlement comes before council for a certain amount of money, it's because our lawyers have told us this is a cheaper way to get rid of the lawsuit than it is to go to trial. Specifically the Stormy Daniels one, those officers committed so much misconduct that our lawyers told us, like, if we're settling for this, we're settling for pennies on the dollar. And now those officers have been fired and dealt with, and that kind of deal. But I think, as all of us, many folks knew already, but all of us have woken up over the past month about how we have put in systems into place to allow and potentially encourage some of this kind of behavior. And I think dismantling these kinds of systems obviously doesn't happen overnight. But I think, Ashley, to your point, it's a question of a budgetary code. I mean, we're looking at a lot of different things that may be department policy. So think about the difference between your employer handbook and what the law says. A lot of things right now are sort of the employer handbook, so the policy of the division of police, and council's taking a really hard look at, well, what maybe shouldn't be just an employee handbook and what maybe should just be the code, what should just be law in the city. One of the things that I've started chatting with folks about, I've been very, very vocal from day one, is from the protest, is that we have way too many officers that had no badge numbers on any of their identifications. So, folks, we all know when you feel anonymous, you can act in a way in which would not be probably the best, because you feel like you get away with things. Whether you're intending to or not, when you feel like no one knows who you are, you maybe act differently, right? So one of the things that I've repeatedly and the division complied with is to make sure that everyone had badge numbers visible when dealing with protesters. Now, unfortunately, I've had to send an email to the chief twice in the past 4 days with photos and videos from citizens who've sent it to me, in which officers, again, were not doing that. So the question becomes, how many times are we going to deal with this internally before I just pass a damn law that says you have to do it? So that's the kind of stuff we're digging into.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, we want to thank you, Councilman Rob, and you as well, Kevin, for your time coming to talk to us. We do have your information that you sent, your emails and your PDFs, and if anybody, hopefully you guys have taken it down and have more questions, you can get in touch with him. We thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Again, it's nice to be among neighbors. I know Laura's run into me at St. James a number of times. You can probably see me at 7th Sun on the patio from time to time when COVID's not raging. So if you all are ever in the neighborhood, just, and I'm out either there or walking my dog, Captain. She may bark at you, but the tail will be wagging. So she's a happy pup, even if she doesn't sound like it. More than
What
happy.
street do you live on?
4th Avenue.
You're right on 4th?
Yep, so we're between 4th Street and Summit. We always joke we're sort of at the corner of 4th and 4th. It's like the nexus of the universe.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, great. And you're welcome to come to the Civic at any time, as you are a neighbor. So please do that, okay?
Well, thanks for having us. And again, whether it's any of the issues we talked about tonight or anything else, or if you just got a question or a suggestion, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, give me a call. Always happy to hear from folks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So we have an announcement that Chris is going to tell you all about. Hopefully it's exciting and fun, and you guys can be a part of it. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. Since we're not having the 4th of July Red, White, and Boom, we decided we wanted to have a celebration within the neighborhood for residents to decorate their front door or their porch with like 4th of July decorations. We're going to host a contest. So between now and July 3rd, we want people to sort of decorate their front porch or front door with 4th of July decorations. And we're going to host a first, second, and third prize of cash. We've decided to give like the first place winner $250, second place winner $150, and a third place winner of $100. And we will walk around the neighborhood on July 4th, take a look at all the various apartments and homes, and see who has the best top 3. And we'll announce the winners on Facebook, share the details on our website, and come by their home and award the cash prize. If you guys want to, we need some help to sort of promote the idea. So if you talk amongst your neighbors, we will post it on Facebook. We'll do everything we can so we can get as many people to sort of take advantage to win some money and sort of dress up their
Join
front
in for
houses.
fun. Yeah, and I wanted to say and add that, you know, I shared with the leadership team of the Civic that as a Black woman being in the Black Lives Movement, I had some trepidation about it after it was an idea in the beginning. And I came to the conclusion that, you know, I'm not mad. I don't hate America. I'm just not happy with America. But as in any relationship, this is my home. And this is something that, you know, I have celebrated for years. And while, you know, I don't feel like people of color have a lot to celebrate in terms of what this country has done, you know, we have celebrated it. And it's been part of our heritage as well. And this is my home. I'm an American, period. So we're going forward, we're going to do it, and we're going to enjoy it. And I'll have my Black Lives Matter up, sign up right in the middle of the red, white, and blue, okay? So I hope you all participate, and I hope you just get yourselves and your neighbors in the spirit of it, okay? I think we need to have some fun too. All right, so thank you for hanging in there with us. We've gone a little over. Does anyone have any questions before we adjourn?
Matt, do you have your hand up? Or did you?
No, I'm just clapping.
Oh, that's okay.
Clap, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Right. I love that. Right. Okay. Well, thank you again for coming, being here. We do expect to have another Zoom meeting in July. We don't know about August, but so far plan to attend via Zoom in July. But for now, thank you guys for coming so much, and we'll be looking at those doors, front porches, okay?
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye, Ashley.
Bye, everyone. See ya.
Bye, Roger. Bye, Pastor. Appreciate you being here. Bye, Jen. Appreciated you. Thank you so much. Laura, love you. Love your wall. She's gone. All right.
All right. See you later. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Great job. Bye-bye.